Hi there, these comments are for Wes. This is Michael. I am from bettertoeflscores.com, onlinetoeflcourse.com. Also, I am an English professor for California State University, San Bernardino. I have your question. So let's take a look at what you're asking here. You say, I've recently decided to get my TESOL certification and curious about something. Here's an excerpt from the study material. There is an argument that often comes up in the education sector around the training of students to be good readers. This debate centers around the idea that some people believe a lot of the training we do is focused on helping the learners develop their reading skills, while others believe that we are focusing on training learners in certain reading strategies. Okay, now I'm going to take this idea. This also kind of relates to the TOEFL and TOEFL reading skills and strategies. So for reading skills, I'm going to use what's called reading proficiency. I'm going to use reading proficiency. Now, when I talk about reading strategies, I want to make sure I clearly define these terms. Reading strategies, in my understanding, it's things like reading for main ideas, reading for detail, information. How about inferences? Such as implied, detail, reading, and so on, right? So the question is it more important to focus on the overall reading proficiency with the students, or should we focus more on the reading strategies, teaching them how to read for main ideas, for example, or reading for detail information, things like that, right? Okay, so here's the way I see it. I believe it or not, I see a reason for both, but my opinion is the most important thing for ESL teachers is to focus on the reading proficiency first. So, and I'm going to give you some basic ideas here, see if this makes sense. So, in order to become proficient in reading, and I help a lot of students prepare for the TOEFL exam, and the TOEFL exam has a very difficult reading section. It has like 3 different reading passages. It can take more than an hour to an hour and a half, and the questions can be very, very difficult. And many of the questions involve the student's ability to read between the lines, understand and infer information from those reading passages, right? So here's my scope. Okay, students, first of all, in order to become proficient, right, they need to build the vocabulary more. And usually, if they get a level of about 2000 basic and college level words, if they can have 2000 basic and college level words, they should have enough to help them become proficient as readers. Number 2, in order to build reading proficiency, students should be practicing extensive reading. It means that they should be reading extensive reading materials for about 45 minutes. I teach in the Center for Global Innovation here at California State University, San Bernardino. I also teach for the English department, but it's important that students find ESL reading materials that are appropriate to their level. For example, a level 1 student whose English is very basic, shouldn't be reading Shakespeare. that should not be something that a level 1 student does. Now, there might be some modified version of a Shakespearean text that students can read that fits their level, but they should be reading extensively for about 45 minutes every day, with reading materials that are suitable to their level. And as they advance and become more proficient, they can get more appropriate reading materials for that level. But they should be reading for about 45 minutes every day. To me, that is absolutely important. So as an ESL teacher, I'm encouraging my students to check out ESL appropriate reading materials from the library on campus here. And they begin reading those books, as many books as they possibly can get their hands on. Number 3, these students should improve their reading speed to about 300 words per minute. And notice how I'm saying 60 to 80% comprehension. They don't need to understand everything that they're doing. So these become, in order to become proficient as readers, students need to do these 3 things. So I'm going to say that these 3 things are important for reading proficiency, right? So building vocabulary, practicing extensive reading, and improving reading speed to about 300 words per minute. So I actually have my students do these kinds of activities to help them become proficient as readers. Now, in addition, there's really a couple of other things here. Is students with reading skills and strategies. And what they can do here, in my case, I help students prepare for the TOEFL exam. This is when they start getting familiar with what's called the TOEFL reading question types. For example, main idea questions, detail questions, implied detail questions, negative detail questions, rhetorical questions, summary type questions, completing chart type questions, insert the order of something type question. So there's a variety of different kinds of questions that the TOEFL asks students to try to understand. On the TOEFL exam, they need to become familiar with what these question types are, and then the strategies for answering them. For example, when I teach my students how to read for main ideas as it relates to the TOEFL exam, I tell them to read the first paragraph to identify the thesis, right? The thesis is the basic blueprint of the entire reading passage. Then I tell them to skim the first line of each body paragraph to check to see if they have found the thesis, to get an idea of what the overall passage is about. I even encourage them to take notes. To maybe each paragraph, they write down in 1 or 2 keywords what that paragraph is about. That would be a strategy. Now, based on what the topics are, or the thesis and the topics of each body paragraph, then we talk about what the main idea might be of that passage, right? So that's number 4. Now, then the last one, these students can complete TOEFL level reading practice tests. Why would they do that? This is important because students can check their comprehension. They want to try to apply the reading skills and strategies for answering different kinds of questions about reading passages. Then they can complete practice tests to see what their comprehension is, and when they miss certain questions, they can study and analyze those questions to see where they went wrong. Now, in looking at reading proficiency and reading strategies, in my opinion, Now, everybody may agree with me here, and you can certainly post your comments below this video at YouTube. I think that students, even students preparing for the TOEFL exam, they should be spending 80% of their time improving their reading proficiency, actually building their reading proficiency first. And then 20% of their time they can spend with reading strategies, understanding main idea, detail, inference, rhetorical questions, and so on. So they do both of those things, right? But in the grand scheme of things, I think one through three become very, very important, and then 4 and 5 are important. As the reading skills get higher and higher, then they can focus more on number 4 and number 5. I hope that makes sense. So that would be my own take on whether it's important to focus on to help learners develop their reading proficiency, or should we be helping them focus on certain reading strategies. In conclusion, I think that most of my efforts, 80% of my efforts, are to help students first build their vocabulary. I motivate them to practice extensive reading, and I help them to improve their reading speed to about 300 words per minute with 60 to 80% comprehension. That would be my focus first. Once they've made a lot of improvements in these 3 areas, then I will begin focusing more on step number 4 and 5.